When you first arrive in America, the scale is the hardest thing to master. I thought the journey from Chapel Hill to Delaware was a smooth-going 45-minute car ride. When I try and comprehend how many Englands, how many me's can fit in here, things really start to swirl. I mean, America is 13.5 million times bigger than my hometown. And so when I look at this land of the large, I wonder, how is it that we find such a home, this inescapable, incomparable home in Carolina? Why here? Why do we keep coming back? You see, scale is relative. The wider you expand a map, the more you simplify it. You've all come from all over the world, but a world map won't include North Carolina, let alone Chapel Hill. A map of the triangle may, but that won't have, say, the Morehead building, whose own map might feature architectural bits and bobs, but not the social geographies of Laurel's office, how she has 2 chairs, one for strong days and one for crying. There's more depth in that office than an entire atlas, so less really can be more. In finding a home in America, I was immediately entranced by the large. I lived in 4 states my first year, Delaware for COVID college, that small town 45 minutes up the road. The 10,000 feet high Colorado mountains in the spring became my home for the next semester, and on paper I had seen America. I was technically fulfilled. I was also exhausted and very much missing something, a root, a base, an office where I knew which chair to sit in. Carolina is a place of the small scale, so much so that I'm convinced all our magnificent smalls start to whirl up together, gain momentum, and create our very own Carolinian system of gravity, drawing us all in. It's simply the only explanation for how such ridiculous coincidences happen all the time. I mean, Tar Heels find each other everywhere. You know that 6 degrees of separation theory, how you're only 6 introductions away from the person next to you? We make that theory look feeble. I mean, we just practically go around bumping into each other on the streets. We just skip it altogether. I've actually heard the real reason our mascot is a ram is because once you become a Tar Heel, you're basically destined to just go around headbutting other Tar Heels on the street. Just the other day, in that pilgrimage from the PNC parking lot to the Raleigh State Fair, my parents, here for 1 week only, bump straight into and realize they are walking alongside their ex-student and Morehead Aussie. I mean, only in Carolina. And let's keep it going. How else would I have gotten through the austere US border whilst entering illegally late on my visa? Well, not from the entire folder of dean-authorized special permission forms Julie gave me. No, not in Carolina. It was that my border agent was a Tar Heel, and he spoke to me about basketball for so long that he forgot to ask me for my I-20. Where else would it be that only after I got here, I realized the college I applied for was where my late grandfather had worked, completely unknown to me. His favorite professorship, despite a resume of Georgetown, Yale, Toronto, and almost a permanent home if it weren't for my formidable grandmother summoning him back to Scotland. And that those annotated copies of Livy he left in Murphy Hall would be then the inspiration for my first UNC professor's life's work and PhD, only in Carolina. Where else could it be that I didn't even know where North Carolina was, and yet it turns out the physical lands of my journey were once joined, that Appalachia belonged to the same mountain range as the Scottish Highlands. Today, North Carolina has more citizens of Scottish ancestry than Scotland itself. Their histories, traditions, and the Scot-Irish ballads my father sang about the house finding a home here far, far before me. What I mean to say with all these pieces is that the small scale, the amalgamations of all these ridiculous coincidences, that is what makes Carolina feel so big. That is what makes it home. That is why we keep coming back. And sometimes with all the wealth of opportunity Morehead presents us, we become so focused on our large scale, our global maps, how many countries we can visit in one summer, how much we have to tell when we return, that we forget the worth of the little things, our communities, our small scale, our Carolina. Because though we've all come here today with so many stories to tell of what's out there, we still come back here to have them heard. And so I ask that as you remember this place, exploring and making change out there, taking Carolina's knowledge everywhere you go, that you remember the worth of the smalls. For when we sing our hymn to Carolina, it won't be to the great stone pillars or the wide sweeping admission shots. It won't be the cities or the connections or freedom or opportunity. What made it right, what made it home for all of us was something small. Remember that, hold on to it. For me, it was the particular shade of the Carolina leaves, that bright sapling, summertime kind of green that reminded me just enough of home to build a new one. I'm going to finish today with a poem written about Carolina. It's actually about the mountains, but I still think it evokes that kind of awe and wonder we feel for this place, at its history and magic, and that sense of a fated connection. And it's fall, so I had to write about the Parkway. It's called A Hymn to the Blue Ridge Mountains, whilst driving up through Highway 276. I'd believe it if you told me you were born from Titan fist, from fission, lacerations of old gods forging rage into Sierra. If your gorges are the burns of brawl, secrets and betrayals stored in seed pods, but once sung around the mountainside by muse and nymph and fairy, just tell me, whisper it to me, that your crests arose from the Norse bones of Ymir, or that they were where Polaris and the red spruce stole a kiss, or that perhaps instead your steep rock face was cut by the piked flight of a buzzard wing, or maybe just the accidental footing of a warbler who knocked it down just a mound or two while splashing in the Fraser fir's blue smock. Yes, I believe it. I know you can imagine any past for you. You, stone guardian of tales, whisper chaser, archaic continent, who once touched the lands of my father's forefathers, of Hibernia and Caledonia, and rose higher than the Himalayas, but chose to come back down again, chose to fall to the ways of the bluegrass fiddle, to the sweet winds of the pipe, with a low bow to the woodlands of the small, who chose somehow to bring me here, me, this one single mammalian lick of sweat and frizz and hangnails, hiding from my nakedness in cloths and unable to coo the life from anything, even an earthworm, chose to gift me with this knowing that in just one leaf, its vein, the smallest green, is an atlas of story, and knowing that every myth and breath of yours was true, enveloped in Appalachia, your wealth of lore. Thank you.